Schiller Institute in the LaRouche Pack. Now, due to the coronavirus, I'm speaking to you from an undisclosed location. No, not to infect anyone. But today is March 14th, 2020. It's the 141st birthday of Albert Einstein, who was one of the greatest geniuses of the last 500 years. Now, I happen to know for a fact that while some people call today Pi Day because it's 3.14, etc., or the ratio of the circumference of the circle to its diameter, I happen to know for a fact that Einstein preferred brownies as opposed to just pies. I know that because he wrote a whole essay on Brownian motion. But instead of starting with a briefing of the latest developments, if you want to find out what's going on with the fight against the coronavirus, I recommend you watch the Fireside Chat from Thursday night with Paul Gallagher. We'll go through basically the first 3 laws of LaRouche's 4 laws, from the requirement for Glass-Steagall, the requirement for National Bank, and the direction of that bank credit, National Bank credit, to massive infrastructure, including building hospitals and developing both the hard and soft infrastructure that we need to survive this crisis. What I want to concentrate on today is LaRouche's 4th law. And I want to go back to 1900 and briefly mention a key collaborator of Einstein, namely Max Planck, who in 1900 discovered that energy in the small is not continuous, but is discrete. It has discrete quantity called quanta, or a discrete packet of energy. Now, 5 years after Planck's discovery, by the way, Planck's discovery was so revolutionary that even Planck doubted its veracity, and he thought it was a useful trick to deal with the paradox of what's called black body radiation. But he was not totally convinced of his discovery. But 5 years later, in 1905, Albert Einstein, using Planck's constant of action, discovered that not only was energy in the small consisting of discrete packets or quanta, but light itself in the very small was not continuous, was discrete. And I'm going to put up on the board the relationship that Planck discovered and that Einstein verified. All right, there. Simply put, this is a relationship between energy in joules, which is a measure of energy. H is Planck's constant, and frequency, which is usually written in the Greek letter nu, but So the energy in the small is related to Planck's constant time the frequency of your packet. And Einstein confirmed that this holds true for light. And the light quanta that Einstein discovered was given the name photon. And we'll go into some of that later on. But just for reference, I'll give you some idea of how small we're talking about here. Planck's constant is equal to 6.626 times 10 to the minus 34 joule seconds. And I'll go through some of that. So, a few years after Einstein's discovery, in 1917, Einstein wrote a paper on the stimulation of radiation. Now, 60 years after Max Planck's discovery, and 55 years after Einstein's discovery, the laser was developed. The first laser was actually built and tested. Now, I'll just give you what the acronym, laser is an acronym, or I won't write the whole thing out, but light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. It comes off the work of over the previous 10 years in the 50s, before the laser, of a microwave amplification by stimulated emission of radiation, or what was called the maser. But before I go on to go through some of the properties of the laser and how it is, in my estimation, the most useful machine tool ever invented. And not only is it a machine tool which is used to build devices, to drill, to cut, it's used in medicine, but it's used in literally thousands of computer or consumer appliances. I'll go through some of that. But before I go on, what do you get when you have Planck and Einstein in the same room?
Two dots.
Einstein.
A pair of dots.
Joe, you're cheating. You get a paradox. Ignore that one. You can edit that. All right, so when the laser was developed, and the first laser was produced a red light, it was a ruby laser. The first developers of the laser, who came from work at Bell Labs that used aircraft electronics company in various universities, they were happy with their achievement, but they were asked, well, what use could this contraption be? They couldn't forecast what it would be used for. Now, my car here has an example of a laser.
Yeah, I got one.
Did you get the megajoule one?
No, I got the little one here.
Is this the 5 watt?
No, it's not 5 watts.
Is it
It's a
1 watt?
less than a watt, probably.
All right. Well, don't look at this at home, but all right. So this is the on
Yeah,
switch.
that's the first button there.
Okay, so this is your typical laser pointer. Now, just to go through some of the principles before I use it on you, is that what Einstein discovered is that given a medium, given a substance, if you inject energy into that substance, either in the form of light or electrical power, and eventually they developed, if you could introduce chemical energy into a substance, a pure substance, what happens is that the electrons in that substance will be given energy, sufficient energy, so they would jump to the next energy level. Now, from Planck's constant of action, this shows that the electrons that orbit every nucleus, from hydrogen all the way past uranium, are not in some continuous selection of orbits. They have specific orbits that they can occupy. So if this is the first laser, and this is the lasing medium, by shining flash lamps or introducing high energy into the substance, the electrons will jump to the higher level. And you will have what's called a population inversion of the electrons from the ground state to a higher state. Now, the electrons want to return back to the lowest energy state. So eventually they will come back down to the ground state. And when they come back down, transition from the higher energy state to the lower energy state, they emit a photon of light at a specific frequency and a specific wavelength. And within the medium, now the basic laser, you have the lasing medium, and you have on both sides of the laser, one side is a perfect mirror where 100% of the photons are reflected. So the photons, after they come down from the higher energy level, will bounce back and forth in the cavity. And on the emission side is a mirror which is semi-transparent. So after a number of bouncing back and forth, resonating, they accumulate enough intensity so that they exit from that semi-transparent mirror into the air or into the vacuum or whatever you're pointing to. So get that laser pointer. Mike, did you take that one
No,
back?
but it just so happens that I've got another one.
Okay, we got
There's
a
another
backup
one.
laser.
I got a
Oh,
couple.
okay, now I got two lasers. So.
You have the one in your
Okay,
hand and the other.
all right.
Okay.
Now, this is your typical pointer. Now, this is the on switch, right?
Yeah, the first one,
The top one.
top one, yeah.
All right.
Except you're not pushing it.
Oh,
Well, he did have
There
one.
you go, there you go.
oh,
Now it's off.
okay. So this is a continuous laser, and you see the pointer. What color is it anyway?
Red.
Red.
Ruby.
All right. So this is like the first laser, ruby laser. Now this is when I keep the power on, it's a continuous laser. Now, I happen to have a photon here, just to give you an example. This is a photon of light. And light is very, very big photon. So light is both a wave and a particle. It has duality. So that light consists of the wavelength, or peak to peak, from one waveform to the other. And it includes the frequency. So how many cycles of this wave per second is your frequency? Now, the other key relationship besides Planck's relationship up here is that light, which all light travels at the speed of light, which is this Planck here, or
Off to
No,
the right.
To the right, go to the right
oh, to
further.
the right? Okay.
Further right. No, don't go too far, but yeah, right in there.
All right.
Okay.
It'll be tested on this later on. So. But this is true for all waves. That is the speed of light. C stands for, I forget if it's Latin or Italian, but it stands for speed. Latin, accelerate. Like when you accelerate, you gain speed. But the speed of light in a vacuum is constant. It changes in air or in water, but in a vacuum of space, the speed of light is, in metric units, 300 million meters per second. So that every second you're going 300 million meters every second. Now, the wavelength is simply the peak to peak, and the frequency is the number of wavelengths or wave fronts that hit a detector in 1 second. Now, to give you an example, just so you have something to measure, if you're using your Wi-Fi or your 5G, and people are freaked out about whether they're going to get killed by the radiation from 5G. Well, the frequency of 5G or your Wi-Fi is around 5 billion cycles per second, or 5 gigahertz. The frequency of light from red to blue to ultraviolet is in the range of 100 to several hundred trillion cycles per second. Now, knowing that the frequency determines the energy of this packet or this photon, that if you look at the energy of a photon of light, and so Planck's constant stays the same, so that if you go from a gigahertz frequency, or billions of cycles per second, to hundreds of trillions of cycles per second, the energy of a packet of visible light is over 100,000 times the energy of a packet from a radio signal or Wi-Fi signal. So if you're afraid of Wi-Fi or 5G, then don't ever step out in the sunlight. Sunlight is much more powerful. So in 1960, the first laser was developed. Now, immediately, the people at Lawrence Livermore saw the potential for using this focused light. And again, the advantage is that once you pump up the lasing medium to a higher energy state that it emits, you stimulate the emission of radiation at a specific wavelength and a specific frequency. You now go from incoherent light at various wavelengths and frequencies, to light with the same wavelength, the same frequency, much less dispersion once it's emitted by the laser, which means that you can focus more energy per square centimeter or more energy per square meter. So think of a knife. This is the sharpest knife that has ever been developed. Now, the people at Lawrence Livermore, they saw the potential for this, and they thought that if we can bring the laser light to bear on a target containing the isotopes of hydrogen, deuterium and tritium, which are used in the hydrogen bomb, and it's the easiest way to achieve fusion on Earth. It requires less energy to bring those isotopes of hydrogen together. If you can bring the laser energy to focus on a small tablet containing the deuterium and tritium, you can achieve fusion. Now, the problem they ran into is they needed more power, more than just a few milliwatts or a few joules of energy. They needed kilowatts or kilojoules of energy. And the limitation of the laser is that the higher the power, the more potential that you have of destroying the lasing medium. So it reached a battery condition where if you have a per square centimeter. Above that threshold, you begin to destroy your laser. So it wouldn't be a very useful way to achieve fusion. So in the mid-1980s, and this is just a couple of years after LaRouche got Ronald Reagan to announce the Strategic Defense Initiative in 1983. In 1985, a young Canadian woman, doctoral student, and her doctoral advisor, Canadian woman by the name of Donna Strickland, and her advisor, they were at the University of Rochester in New York State. And they were working on a way to increase the power of a laser without having a huge buildup. Now, just to give you an idea of the size, Mike, can you show what the size of the National Ignition Facility is?
Yeah, there you go.
Get the light?
Okay, can you see that?
Not yet.
What is it? You want it on the projecting?
No, he's gonna put an image on it.
Right here, yeah.
Okay, is it up there?
Yeah, it's up.
No, it isn't.
It's on the screen.
You don't have the thing up.
No, this is it. This is it.
Okay.
Mike knows
Yeah.
what he's doing.
Yeah.
Okay, the National Ignition Facility is at the National Lab in Livermore, in the Bay Area of California. It was started up by Edward Teller, and this is the most powerful laser in the world. And because of the limitation of the medium, they had to build out the lasing system so that it consists of 192 beams that converge on a target chamber that is 30 feet in diameter. Now, the energy that you can deliver from this laser to the target chamber is over 1 billion joules. Now, just to give you some reference point of what we mean by a joule of energy, this is another relationship. Is this clear?
Yes.
Yeah.
That power in watts is equal to the energy in joules divided by time in seconds. So that if I have a 1 watt laser, that means I can deliver 1 joule of energy in 1 second. Now, just for comparison, if you have a 60-watt light bulb, that means that light bulb is delivering 60 joules every second. So that's 60 watts. Now, using what Donna Strickland and her advisor, Gerard Moreau, what they developed is a way of amplifying a pulse of light from a few watts to over a quadrillion watts. The first reached 1 trillion watts. Now, what you do is you don't deliver that 1 trillion watts for the whole second. Say if I take 1 joule, and instead of delivering that joule in 1 second, if I deliver that joule in a femtosecond, or a millionth of a billionth of a second, or 10 to the minus 15, that joule in that femtosecond, the peak power is a petawatt, or it's 1 times 10 to the 15 watts. Now, delivering that much power in that limited time is useful in surgeries, in eye surgeries, as a machine tool for drilling holes. It's used in all sorts of manufacturing, including manufacturing your iPhone, various components. So this petawatt laser, which was invented in the mid-'80s and has been developed since then, was so significant that the doctoral dissertation from this young woman, this young Canadian, Donna Strickland, was so significant that she and her advisor were recently awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2018. Now, again, this petawatt laser is being used in industry, universities, in your eye surgeon, all sorts of uses. Now, getting back to the National Ignition Facility, the National Ignition Facility, the initial pulse before it's amplified is in the range of 10 to 20 nanoseconds. So again, if you use this relationship, power relationship, if you have a megajoule of energy delivered in a few nanoseconds, the National Ignition Facility can deliver to that target chamber over 500 trillion watts of power in a few nanoseconds. Now, using what's called, what Donna Strickland and her advisor, Gerard Moreau, called chirp pulse amplification. Essentially what they do is that they take a pulse of energy coming in and they stretch it so that the wavelength is stretched, and the longer the wavelength, the smaller the frequency. And they amplify that stretched signal. And because it's less frequencies, the energy of that pulse is less intense so that it doesn't damage the lasing medium. And after they've amplified it, they compress it using various schemes, diffraction, prisms, and other optical schemes. They compress it and they can produce a laser that can deliver its power over 15th or a femtosecond, a millionth of a second. Now, given that this laser can deliver that much power in that short a pulse, others in various universities around the world saw this as a potential to be used to achieve fusion without having the gargantuan setup of something like the National Ignition Facility. There's a similar facility in France that produces about a megajoule. It's actually called the laser megajoule. And it has the same basic setup. It has 46 laser beams, and it's used both for fusion research and also to examine the characteristics of hydrogen bombs without detonating hydrogen bombs. So it has defense and energy application. Now, using this petawatt laser, a professor in Australia recently announced, and the university works at the University of New South Wales in Australia, Professor Orich Hora. He's in his late 80s. He's been in Australia since around 1975. But he proposed that we use the petawatt laser to initiate fusion in what's called the boron-hydrogen reaction. Now, I've gone through this in other classes, but the standard fuel for fusion research are two isotopes of hydrogen, deuterium and tritium. There are other companies that are working with, instead of using tritium, and the problem with deuterium tritium is the products are alpha particles or helium nuclei, which is positively charged, and a neutron, which is neutral and is not controlled by the magnetic fields of these various fusion test reactors. So the neutron carries away 80% of the energy of that fusion reaction and can damage the walls. You have to have shielding. It requires quite a bit of shielding, about a meter's worth of shielding if you're in the same building. Now, using deuterium and helium, instead of a neutron, you get an alpha particle or a helium nucleus and a proton as your reaction products, so that all your reaction products are positively charged and can be controlled by magnetic fields. So it reduces the necessity for a large amount of shielding. Now, there's another reaction that various companies have used, including one in Southern California called tri-alpha energy. And what they use is, instead of a tritium or helium, they use a regular hydrogen or just a proton, and they heat up the plasma and smash it into another plasma, which contains boron. Now, boron is a very common element. It's the 5th element on the periodic table. I think it was formed by the combination of Bush and boron. So you get boron. But it is a real element. You get in borax. But it's common. We don't have to mine it from the moon like helium-3. But if you have a high-speed proton smash into a boron, they call it boron 11 because it has 5 protons and 6 neutrons. That's the most common isotope of boron. And when that reaction occurs, instead of generating element 6 or carbon on the periodic table, carbon, the most common form, has 6 protons and 6 neutrons, so it's carbon 12, which a lot of the greenies are trying to eliminate from the periodic table. They don't like the carbon, even though most humans are 18% carbon. But instead of creating carbon, what happens is when the proton at high speed hits the boron, it breaks up the boron 11 so that you end up with 3 helium nuclei, hence the name tri-alpha energy. So this is the type of reaction that Professor Horo was working on. Now, the problem we have with the higher elements with more protons in the nucleus is that while to fuse deuterium tritium, it's thought that we need something in the range of 10 times the heat of the core of our sun. Our sun's core is thought to be in the range of 15 million degrees centigrade. So to achieve fusion, and we have achieved fusion in the various facilities, like the National Mixer facility. The problem is we put more energy in to achieve the fusion reactions than we get out from the fusion reaction. So in other words, it's below break even. The goal is to go above, way above break even. But as you go up the periodic table, helium-3 requires more heat energy to fuse than deuterium and tritium because of the extra proton in helium-3, which has 2 protons and 1 neutron. Now, to fuse boron, instead of hundreds of millions of degrees, you need close to 3 billion degrees centigrade. So you need a very intense plasma to fuse the boron. And this tri-alpha company has received hundreds of millions of dollars from private investors. They think they're on the way to achieving it. But again, you need very high temperatures. Now, this Professor O'Hara, in his announcement last month, and he's actually started a company with colleagues at the University of New South Wales. His company is called HB11 Energy, for hydrogen boron 11 energy. Now, what his plan is to have a sphere with a vacuum with a target, a pellet of boron and hydrogen in the pellet. Now, instead of using 192 laser beams, his concept is to use just 2 petawatt lasers. One that will ionize and create a plasma of the pellet, of the boron hydrogen pellet. And another, once that plasma is created, another laser will fire, and because of the high power and short pulse, there are things called non-linear optics, which Donna Strickland was studying and is still working on. She's now a professor in Waterloo, Canada, Waterloo University. Nothing to do with Napoleon. But using these petawatt lasers, his scheme is, again, to create the plasma with one laser and then use a second laser to accelerate the proton gas, or the protons, so that instead of just having a random heat to smash the nucleuses together, he's targeting the protons, and his calculations and his estimate are that the reactions from accelerating the protons with the laser beam, that he can target the proton beam directly into the plasma of boron and increase the reaction rates 1 billion times, so that he no longer has the need for high hundreds of millions and billions of degrees centigrade to create the plasma, and he doesn't need the magnetic fields to contain the plasma, because these lasers are so short pulse that once you zap the boron hydrogen pellet, the plasma exists for a few trillionths of a second. Then you accelerate the proton beam, and once you achieve the fusion reaction, you get the 3 alphas, or the 3 helium nuclei coming out. These are all positively charged. You can go from the positive charges through a coil to directly generate the electricity. So it has direct energy conversion potential. Now, this is his concept. He's gotten patents in United States, China, and Japan. Now, obviously, this is a concept. He hasn't built a prototype. So what they have to do is actually build the prototype, demonstrate the fusion, and from there, it'd be like creating the first laser. The proof of concept will open the door to fusion reactions that will revolutionize not only energy production in the United States, in Australia, China, all over the world, but will open the door to use fusion power for travel, not only to Mars, but throughout the solar system. So obviously we're not there yet, but if these type of concepts, using the discoveries that were made over 120 years ago by Planck and then developed by Einstein, and if you just think of Einstein, not only did he come up with the concept of the photoelectric effect, which verified Planck's idea of a quanta of energy, but Einstein, obviously you all know that he developed the energy mass equivalent, which was the foundation of both fission power and fusion power, and it explained the power of the sun, which was unknown up to 100 years ago. That in 1916 and 17, Einstein also hypothesized that you could have what's called gravity waves, something which is not in the electromagnetic spectrum, but are vibrations of the gravity field in the universe. And the vibrations are so small that even Einstein back then said, well, we'll never be able to detect them. Well, 4 years ago, in 2016, there was a huge announcement that a new observatory called LIGO detected gravitational waves that Einstein had predicted 100 years before. Well, LIGO stands for Laser Interferometry of Gravitational Wave Observatory. So again, the laser that Einstein, using Planck's foundation, was able to lay the groundwork for, was used to verify another one of his ideas of detecting gravitational waves, which gives us another telescope to fully understand the laws of the universe. And again, if you look at what has come from this discovery of quantized light, the laser, and before that the transistor, but if you look at every household, you look at your compact disc player, it has a small diode solid state laser that reads the pits on your disc, optical disc, to give you very high quality audio. If you have a laptop that has a DVD player, a digital video disc, it uses a laser. It's estimated that every year, close to 750 million lasers are sold. Not individually, but embedded in consumer products like CDs, DVDs. Now, if you've gone beyond the DVD and you just get your video over the internet, well, the backbone of the internet today is based on fiber optics. And fiber optics transmit light, and the light comes from lasers. And because lasers have so much higher frequency range than radio signals, you can pack more zeros and ones in a packet of light than in a packet of, say, your Wi-Fi or even your 5G. So the more cycles per second, the more zeros and ones you can have, the more information you can transmit. Again, the wave is traveling at the speed of light, but between the beginning of the wavefront and the end of the wavefront, if you have more cycles per second, that's more material, more information that you can carry in that little photon. So the whole internet is based on fiber optics, which are driven by lasers. If you remember from Bill Binney's presentation, he always mentions that the NSA doesn't have to listen to every individual computer or every individual telephone if they can tap into the nodes where these fiber optic cables come into the United States and leave the United States. It's like tapping your phone. They can have access to all that light, digital light traffic traveling, which contains your emails, your voice messages, your videos. So everything is online, but the whole basis of the internet is the laser signals that drive through the fiber optics. If you look at the potential to achieve fusion with lasers, this concept that has come from Australia could be the key. It could be the way that we take a kangaroo jump over the existing concepts and actually achieve break even. But it just gives you a sense that from knowing the discoveries made 120 years ago and developed ever since then of how the universe works, that it doesn't have just continuous energy, that there are discrete packets. And you can use that knowledge to develop tools like the laser. Again, it's a machine tool, it's a consumer product, it's used in defense, it's used in offense, so it's one of the most versatile tools ever developed. If you look at the thousands of applications from that laser, it derives from the mind of two docs, Planck and Einstein. And the continuing development by people like, by the way, Donna Strickland was the third woman to have to get the Nobel Physics Prize. The others being Marie Curie in 1903 and less well-known figure, Maria Goeppert-Mayer in 1963. So Donna Strickland is the third woman to achieve the awarding of the Nobel Physics Prize. But her idea of chirp pulse amplification expands the use of the laser in medicine, in fusion research, in all sorts of machining. And again, instead of having a huge laser facility, you can have a petawatt. And again, that's a quadrillion watts of power available on a lab tabletop. So when LaRouche goes through the idea that discoveries lead to the development of machine tools that increase the power of labor, that if you have a population that can use these tools, then the power of that society to have an increased population density is increased. So this doesn't mean that this is all that we need to know. Obviously, this is just one concept that has been developed. But if you look at the laws of the universe, we still have a lot to learn. But if we use the example of Planck and Einstein and those that came after them, and use the ideas, the conceptual ideas of LaRouche, who put it all together, say that this is the basis of economics, not the stock price, not the amount of toilet paper you can stash, but the amount of ideas that you can translate into a physical tool that can increase your power over nature. And just a concluding remark on the virus, it's time that the noosphere assume dominion over the biosphere and put the virus and Wall Street in quarantine. So, you got any questions on the internet, or we'll take some questions here?
Do you see any applications for the lasers and so forth in solving the viral epidemic?
Well, yeah, I didn't mention this, but you may remember from Lynn's reports in the mid-'80s, there was something called the free electron laser. Now, that's not from Bernie Sanders. It's not free lasers. Is that if you have an electron that is in a magnetic field that is undulating, going up and down, you can fine-tune the frequency, because when the electron goes up and down, it emits a photon, and you can tune it to a specific frequency. If we can determine the frequency that will kill the virus, then you could have somebody attach to something like a dialysis machine and just run their blood through this machine and use that laser to knock out not the red blood cells, not the plasma, but the specific virus that you're targeting, and then reintroduce that cleansed blood back into the patient. That was one way that LaRouche and others proposed that we can get rid of the AIDS virus discover the frequency of the virus that is susceptible to destroying it, and we can destroy the virus using a laser.
Joel, do you know if there's any work on that right now?
I don't know if any
Yeah.
ongoing work. We were working with people like James Frazier at the Texas Medical Center, but I don't know if he's even still alive. But this again was work that was being done in the 80s after Reagan adopted the Russian Strategic Defense Initiative. But the tragedy is that the Strategic Defense Initiative wasn't built out, and the spin-offs that we could have obtained from that type of research has been sitting there in front of us for 35 years.
Yes.
And it's now time that we pick up the torch.
Joel, could you just reiterate exactly what Donna Strickland discovered? I mean, I understand it has to do with, a laser on a laser that doesn't destroy the medium.
Right.
But that's about the completeness that I have.
Well, it takes 3 steps. So you have a pulse of light energy coming in, and through what's called the diffraction gratings. This is a diffraction grating. So that the light going through the diffraction grating, you spread it out, almost like a prism. So that once you stretch out that pulse, because of Planck's constant, the longer the wavelength, the smaller the frequency, and the smaller the frequency, the less energy per quantum of light. So that if you stretch out that light signal, then you can amplify that light signal because it's less energy per quantum or per photon. So that even though you amplify that signal, you're not pumping in more than a billion watts per square centimeter. So the stretch signal allows you to amplify it without destroying the medium. And so there's the first step is to stretch the signal. The second step is to amplify it. Once you've amplified it, and you exit that medium, then you use optical techniques to compress it back to the high frequency. And that compression gives you both a short pulse or high frequency cycles per second, and it gives you the higher energy content per photon. So again, if you take that joule of energy over 1 second and instead deliver it in a millionth of a billionth of a second, that power in that small pulse is a quadrillion watts of power delivered in that short pulse. So it's stretch, amplify, and then compress. It's called chirp pulse amplification.
Sure.
Like chirp, chirp, chirp. It's part of what's called nonlinear optics. So that you're not just building up. If you want more power, you get a bigger device. But if you use the properties of nature, you can use these nonlinear effects to increase your power density.
Now, did she develop nonlinear optics too?
She greatly, well, working with her advisor, this guy Moreau, she came up with the idea. And imagine her Nobel Prize came from her doctoral dissertation. she worked, once she got her doctorate from University of Rochester, she worked at the Lawrence Livermore. This was before the National Ignition Facility was built. But she worked at Lawrence Livermore for a couple of years before that. And now they're using this type of amplification. So they're using the big laser, but they're also using the smaller chirp lasers. So it's being used all over the world now.
Pretty amazing.
And it goes back to the discoveries of Planck and Einstein 120 years before.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I see that.
Now, the problem we run into is this company in Australia has a new concept. Are we guaranteed it will work? We don't know it's going to work. There may be some problem in the acceleration. But if we can spend $1.5 trillion in a few weeks to bail out Wall Street, if we could tap maybe 1,000th of that, just a lousy $1.5 billion for funding research at the University of New South Wales, at University of Texas has a petawatt laser, at the national laboratories, at the private companies like Princeton Fusion Systems Company. And these companies are starved for funds. You know, they have these ideas. The only reason why the National Ignition Facility was built and it has funds is part of the Nuclear National Security Agency. Not the NSA, but it's to ensure the viability of our nuclear arsenal without having to test hydrogen bombs in the desert of Nevada. So it has more money than these smaller companies. But so if we had a crash program, what LaRouche calls for, then these type of concepts could be funded. And if you fund a dozen or 100 of these concepts, and 99 of them fail, but that one concept that we haven't thought of yet, or that one tweak of the device that we haven't thought of, if that one concept develops or reaches break even, then that opens the whole capability. Be like the Wright brothers figuring out how to keep a plane in the air.
Yep. Yep.
Now, if you can do it for 12 seconds, you can do it for days.
That's exciting.
Wow.
The other use of this is, I'm sure you've used this, is that you can get cats running all over the room, following the laser beam. Is that what you use it for, Mike?
No, I don't use it for that, but I have seen cats.
Okay, you've probably seen videos of that.
I've seen my brother-in-law's cat run that.
So I
Alright.
would do that too.
But not all cats like them. Some cats like them, some cats don't.
Well, they think it's a living
Critter.
thing.
I called up the blood center the other day where I give blood and asked if they test for coronavirus, because if they did, I figured I might go get a test, but they say no, it's because it's not in the blood. It's not detectable in the blood. It's a respiratory
Oh,
virus that's down there in the lining of the lungs, but so therefore you can't determine it through a blood test. So you know, I'm convinced there are applications for this, but it's not.
Well, I'm sure when it multiplies, it's not just multiplying in the lungs, because again, I don't know the details, but I think I've heard it's in the urine, it's in the feces, it's in saliva. So once you build up a viral load, it's not just in your lungs. So
What may be in the lymph system, you know, because it does affect other organs, I've heard, but I don't know what other organs.
right.
And, but, it may not be systemic through the blood, it may be systemic through the lymph system. But, I mean, that's stuff we need to find out.
Yeah, right.
Learn about
No,
that.
I know.
Yeah,
They're working
right.
on
Yeah.
I'm convinced there's a way you could just go through the body as transparent and zap these little viruses, you know. I'd have to take the blood out.
Well, they do have, you know, about the proton therapy. And they have these particle accelerators that accelerate the proton into where your say lung cancer is, and it's targeting that where they're pointing, so it deposits the energy to a specific point without damaging the rest of the body. And they use that for various cancer therapies.
Yeah.
At the Texas Medical Center?
I think they do have proton therapy for prostate treatments, prostate cancer, other cancers. And I think Rice University was working on if you introduce something like a gold capsule that the metabolism of the cancer is higher than normal cells, so it eats what you introduced there, the glucose or whatever. And if you can get it to have this gold capsule, that becomes a target, and you have either a laser or radio frequency that's specific to that capsule. So you can apply the energy into that capsule, and it will destroy what's around that capsule without destroying the rest of the organ in that area. So there are all sorts of possibilities. But, like I said, if we could use even a small percent of that 1.5 trillion that the Federal Reserve just dumped on Wall Street last week, which lasted about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But we have the money, we have the things that we could be looking into. The problem is we don't have a crash project that would fund these things. It's like Brunelleschi's dome. You don't have to start a project. You don't have to know how you're going to finish a project to start it. If you have the idea that man is able to use the laws of the universe to make the discoveries and to make the breakthroughs.
Joel, thanks.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.